Scholars of global conflict and cooperation like Kenneth Waltz have made arguments like the world is a self-help system and states are the players on that global stage. Well, one of the means to assert diplomatic pressure on either member states or individuals within a state is through the mode of sanctions. And the sanctions can be with regards to whatever aspect that the sanctioning state or the sanctioning party deems fit. Officials in Uganda, in public office like the Speaker of Parliament, among other officials, more so those who were implicated in the Karamoja scandal, have been sanctioned by the USA and UK government, among other individuals. The sanctions have not even spared their spouses. So for those of you who are considering to getting married soon, you might need to think about it. But well, we shall talk about that and the implications it has on the geopolitics of our region, but also on the global stage. The second part is that we welcome you back from the Martyr's Day celebration, and we shall talk about an emerging economic sector, which is, the aspect of religious tourism. We know how much money goes into the coffers of Saudi Arabia each time Muslims go to Mecca. So perhaps maybe we need to consider Namugonga and many other religious sites in the country as more than just religious sites, but as a source of tourism and economic benefit for the country. Viewers, I'm joined this afternoon by a panel of eminent gentlemen that I now introduce to you, and of course in no particular order, from the National Resistance Movement, and that is the Youth League. The name is Nimrod Kakayi. Nimrod, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. It's always a good time, a good moment for me to come and share my views here. And I'm again glad to talk to the viewers with our very, very correct views. Thank you.
We are very happy to have you. The last panelist is a lawyer in the making and one of the founders of Tuzungumze Africa. The name is Lawel Muhwezi. Lawel, it's always a privilege to have you.
I'm also always glad to be part of the show. Once again, my name is Lawel Muhwezi. I work with Tuzungumze Africa. Tuzungumze means let's discuss. I am always glad to be given such a platform. Happy to be back.
Well, let's just begin with you. What do you make of these sanctions anyway? Do they matter?
Yes, I think they do. Of course, the last month or two has been, about the discussion on sanctions. And there has been a lot of relations, a lot of happiness from, I think, activist circles, from the opposition, especially the leading opposition party, the National Unity Platform, over the sanctions. First to the Speaker of Parliament, and then I think the other ministers who are in charge of the which has been termed the Karamoja Iron Ships that were meant to provide relief to the people of Karamoja. I think that the happiness and the excitement comes from a perceived win or a perceived net positive. That, at least at some point, the people who have constantly maybe abused their power or constantly abused people's citizens' human rights or taken away from the vulnerable and the poor have at least been called out and to some extent going to pay for their actions. We can have a discussion on whether indeed they are going to pay or whether sanctions are that effective, but at least you can tell from the people within the activist circles and the opposition that this is a net good. But you can also tell from the discomfort from the political players in parliament and people in government that indeed this means something. I think beyond just the material of to what extent does it create closure for the opposition and the affected people, it also has a bigger implications on the international relations and geopolitics. If you want to know how that is, I think you saw a response to Chris Obore's letter when the first the UK sanctions came about, and then he responded. Because these are delicate issues between two countries. One perhaps is a smaller country versus global powers, but it speaks a lot to the international relations, the relations between these two countries. And whereas you are going to constantly see political commentators, NRM stalwarts playing hard guys, playing as if this means nothing to them, as a poor or developing country, we rely so much on the West. We rely so much on the US, we rely so much on the UK, but also UK is not just UK or US is not just US. These have a lot of influence on the policy direction or approach of
the
all the
European
Western
Union.
allies, right? So when you're living in a country where about 40% of the education system is serviced or financed by the West, the health sector is so much financed by the US itself. You saw the debate around homosexuality and how actually the court ruling came out to leave health support to the people under LGBTQ. It tells you how essential the US financing of the health sector is very instrumental. So when you see such statements as sanctions, they're not just the communique that you see. It speaks so much to the relation between the Uganda and these countries. But also you've got to understand in terms of geopolitics, on how there has been like a good relationship with Uganda providing regional security in alliance with the US, right? Under IGAD, under all these other arrangements. I think these sanctions communicate to some sort of a regional shift in terms of the geopolitics, the alliances. We perhaps on another day are going to have a bigger discussion on geopolitics with Ruto, you know, falling as if falling to the king. You know how Uganda fall before their king. Most people have that's their conceptualization of the Ruto-US relationship. You know about the Rwanda and UK migration arrangements they have. So I think these sanctions speak so much to the relationship between us and our allies in the West.
Wow,
That's
very
what I
interesting.
can say.
Nimrod, just an opening statement, like what do you make of these sanctions?
Thank you. For the last, as you said, for the last 2 months, I've been listening to a number of commenters in this political arena, activists, and the government from two sides about the sanctions. But to me, here's the thing. You see, the UK and the USA targeted sanctions. It speaks exactly of who they are to us, the Africans. When you look at the African continent, around 8 countries are grappling with sanctions on the African continent. When you look at all those countries, most of them are war-torn countries. Libya, South Sudan, and many others, including now Uganda, on that list. But to me, the question of double jeopardy between these countries is something that we should pay attention to. One, if the UK government means well to the sovereign state of Uganda, I don't think sanctioning leaders that they targeted was the first thing to be done. You are sanctioning ministers who are in the courts of law in Uganda. And the cases are still going on. The proceedings are still going on. They have not been judged yet. Secondly, you're even sanctioning someone else who the government of Uganda found that has no case to answer in regards to saying stealing from the vulnerable poor. Thirdly, you're saying you push for the rule of law. You support the rule of law. But again, this whole thing shows that you're undermining the rule of law in Uganda, that you don't have trust in our courts of law to go ahead and deal with these matters. I would have thought that when they come out to sanction, they say, okay, Honorable Goreti Gitutu, you took away 100 iron sheets. These iron sheets were meant for Karachunas, all the so-called people, and because of that, we have sanctioned you. It's not there. So what is the basis? Which process do they go through to determine how to sanction? Because here we are seeing sanctions, but we never know the process. Okay, they are not legal, sanctions are not legal, they are political, per se. But again, what case exactly are you sanctioning on as a basis? What was the case? 2, if you're saying that stealing from the vulnerable poor, how many people did that? If you're saying the version of iron sheets, they're over 30 plus. Okay? But How comes you zero down to this? So in my making is one, this is to undermine the justice system of Uganda. Two, this is against the good cordial relationship we have between Uganda and the UK government. Three, it is important that the UK or the other states that believe in sanctions first engage this government and know how far they have gone with dealing the matters internally. And also, the sanctions, the people you are sanctioning, for example, the Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, you have seen letters from government, from the president, with good intentions that let's go down to the deep issue of this matter. Let's understand this issue deeply. If you're saying that Anita has maybe an account of £10,000 and a house in the UK, let's go deep and understand. Is this house supporting the children there, or is it about the money she took from this? What's the exact reason? And the president has gone ahead to demonstrate that even writing officially to the UK government. That's the cordial relationship, that the diplomacy terms is saying we can deal with this amicably than putting sanctions on these individuals. Another thing is that these individuals, even though sanctioned them, they can still live a good life without coming to your country. Yes, they can. How many have they been sanctioned? We know the list is long.
So what's the problem?
So the problem is, if you continuously support Uganda and you're putting this intense environment between this country, because these are high-level leaders, ministers, cabinet ministers, the third most powerful person in the country, you are sanctioning them, you're creating an intense environment between these two states. At the end of the day, a lot of repercussions may come to the vulnerable person you're trying to protect. I come from Namisi Ndua, where there is Manafa and Ududa. Two ministers who have been sanctioned. One is from Duda, another one is from Manafa.
Sure.
Yes. Nadut is from Ududa,
Because they are
Ret is from Manafa.
involved in
Their spouses, for goodness sake, that even they could not get a picture of them. These are very innocent people who have supported their women into the system of serving the communities. But here they are, the children,
They're
are paying the price. So if you are saying that you support human rights, yeah, why are you why are you dealing with these people, innocent people who were not even that in boardroom, maybe that did that discussion? Their spouses were not in that boardroom. Why are you sanctioning them?
Is there an aspect of, I don't know,
Let me
vicarious
conclude
liability
before Lawel comes in.
Really?
Let me conclude before Lawel comes in. One, I continuously say that sanctions are not legally binding. They are politically motivated.
Yeah, they are politically motivated.
So, if they are politically motivated, me who is a husband of someone who is not into politics, why are you using them against me? Thirdly, the people that this person supports in the communities are also affected. Now, what are you exactly protecting?
You said they have no consequence or little consequence
No,
to these people.
The consequence, I'm saying, how in the long term,
How does it affect them in the long term?
Let me just bring up something before you proceed.
Yes.
And I'm obviously triggered by your argument to mention Rex versus Amkeo,
Yes.
which was a decision in the Kenyan courts during the colonial era. I think, to me, when you look at the sanctioning of spouses, to me that goes a long way in terms of undermining what the African value and what the African principles stand for. Because I think to the UK or USA government, maybe they still don't consider what we perceive as marriage here in the African context as marriage to them. Because ideally, why would you be sanctioning
Exactly.
a spouse? So, because you know, a family or any marriage is a sanctity. Like, you cannot, like, I don't know.
So
I think it goes a long way in terms of undermining.
Exactly. So as I conclude, as I conclude, you realize, in my opinion, that these sanctions I cover target these individuals, scare them to pursue certain things, and cover what they want. It's not about stealing, it's not about protecting the vulnerability.
What they want.
To me, they are trying to target individuals and cover something.
Act?
It's one of them, we cannot rule it out. You have seen the US saying undermining human rights.
But who moved the motion?
You get?
They have not been sanctioned.
But who chaired the motion? Who was the chair? But let me finish that. So as I conclude, it is clearly that the times we are in are times of indirect colonization. And it is upon us as Africans and Uganda as a sovereign state to stand firm and say, we can deal with this, we can build our systems, and our systems can deal with everyone. If they're found guilty, I don't condone corruption is bad. It has taken a lot away from us. And as a movement, it is among the 10 points. It's the 7th point. Why President went to the bush. So we don't condone. It's bad. Corruption is terribly bad. And if someone has been found guilty, I agree highly. Let them be charged by Ugandan courts, sentence them, serve their sentence, but not the other states coming. It's like a neighbor telling you that the food you give to your kids is not good enough. I have the best food, but you're the one with all of these kids. You know what they like and what they don't like. So let's deal with our issues
internally.
Yes.
Lawel.
You want me to react?
Yeah, just
now, let me say this. I think we need to honestly broaden this discussion. I do not know what you people are taught when you go to Chankwanzi. You know, there's this whole Marxist, there's this whole anti-colonialist narrative that you guys always espouse. You know, these guys are here to, you know, colonize us. They are here to pursue their own interests. Anyone who has done some international relations, even any politicians, knows that everyone is constantly looking out for themselves, right?
And I said it. I said the world is a soft hope system.
Yes, exactly. Museveni espoused the same notions when he was in the bush. When you even look at his paper on violence, when he was, I think, quoting Frantz Fanon, right? Yeah. He's real Marx, right? But when he takes over power, he realizes the realities, right? That the West, the capitalist or the neoliberal world, runs the show, runs Africa, right? They have the World Bank, they have the dollar. You cannot transact without the dollar. Those are the realities. And however patriotic you are as an African, if you want to maintain power or to even work for your people, you have to rely on loans from the World Bank, right? You have to survive on aid from the West, right? Even if you don't, they have the power to oust you. You like to quote these Pan-Africanists. You talk about Patrice Lumumba. We talk about the Sankaras. We know what happened to them, right? When they decided they're African and they want to do with the West. So when you're the president of Uganda, you're faced with a reality, and somehow you're forced to cleverly give the West its interests, while protecting your own interests. Now, let me come.
When Raisi, the late Magufuli, was faced with the same contradictions, how did he respond to it? Because you may recall, Magufuli actually, I think he cut almost Tanzania's borrowing to almost zero. He said,
that's where I'm going. And that's where I'm going. So when you find yourself in a fix, you have to constantly find a way of maximizing your own potential while limiting the survival on foreign aid or on the West, right? The problem we have here is that our African leaders don't do much to build our own capacity, right? To be self-sustaining, to be able to depend on ourselves. Because when you look at Magufuli, he took steps in the right direction to be frugal, to cut government expenditure on things that were not productive. What do we do here? I don't know if you're getting it. So the problem is that we constantly refuse to deal with our own problems. We constantly don't invest in our local investors. We have a higher cost administration cost. We have, you saw how much we are spending on food, on special meals in the current budget. So once you constantly refuse to build self-sustaining capacity, you have to constantly rely on the West. So this whole rhetoric, I know where I sit, that it's empty, it's a lie. Because we are constantly puppets of the West, and that's what Museveni has been, the channel of the West in the Great Lakes region. That's what he is. So let me come now. Now, going on to sanctions, the truth is that there is nothing Pan-African about the NRM government. It is only when they're at the receiving end that they start to preach this rhetoric. Even if that were true, and he's saying, look, the 10 points program is talking about, there's such a thing as corruption. right? The problem is that we are not handling the corruption. It's not lack of evidence that Anita Among has not been prosecuted, or Amos Lugorobi. You know for sure that there were newspaper covers that Amos Lugorobi had taken the iron sheets. There are even pictures of him having it on his farm, right? The Speaker of Parliament also admitted, but she says, look, I have returned them, right? But you know, in law, when you're caught with something that you acquired illegally, you can't say, I have returned it, therefore I'm exonerated of the offense. But we people who stay here, Kidega and him, you know outrightly that these guys have constantly deprived the poor. You see the expenditures the Speaker of Parliament is making. We know that Anita Among will not be prosecuted in local courts, right? And so the reason why people are jubilating when he's sanctioned is not because they like America more than they love Uganda. It is because they have realized that the local infrastructure is not willing to hold these people to account.
Lawel, our local courts have successfully in the past prosecuted powerful ministers like Muhwezi, Sam Kutesa, and gone ahead to convict them.
Oh my God, you are the most dishonest person.
No.
Have you ever seen
Gavi
Sam
funds.
Kutesa step in prison?
Didn't Gavi Fund find Sam Kutesa and company culpable? They did. So you coming here to say that our courts of law have completely done nothing about about this category of people is also being dishonest about it, because there are several examples.
Kidega. Now this is my question to you. Now that you say, when was Anita Among prosecuted for the theft or diversion of resources to Karamoja? She was not prosecuted. It was only the smaller weight ministers that were prosecuted. Nothing has been done conclusive. Let me say this. But just to wrap this, the point I'm making here is that
even a former vice president, I think by then he was serving as the vice president, Bukenya. He was convicted.
Let me say this.
For
Let me say this, Kidega, conclusively.
By our own courts of law.
Because I am sure that the viewers out there know this, that indeed Anita Among diverted resources and she was not prosecuted, and that's not the only thing she has done. And many other people, the current state or regime, unless it has fallen out with its henchmen, cannot prosecute them. The Sam Kutesa we're talking about has lost a case at international level. We have not had the guts to deal with it locally because he's a big man. I'm going to say this, that even if it were true, that these individuals did not commit it or were not prosecuted by local courts, I say that an independent country, depending on their intelligence, can decide whether to relate with you or not. And this is how sanctions work. For example, if people in Kenya are doing something is happening in Kenya that we do not agree with. Let's say, for example, there's no electoral transparency in Kenya. We as Uganda can decide that given on what we see in Kenya, we do not want maybe politicians or Sakaja or Raila to come to Uganda. This is within our right as Uganda. I don't know if you're getting it.
Okay, but do you put that right within the global context?
Even within the global context. Now, let me say this.
Know that there are certain rights.
Let me say this. Unlike our Uganda police or our finest spokespersons of police, the UK and the US are sophisticated systems. The UK embassy here, the US embassy here, I don't want to go into CIA, they have much more intelligence than even our local entities. I am sure that they have capacity to understand what the real issues are. And therefore, their foreign policy is informed. Their steps, they don't just come without research, is informed by their...
Aren't you giving them so much credit?
Oh my God,
Kidega. I feel like you're speaking like a sycophant of the West.
Kidega.
You're giving them so much credibility. I mean, to the extent that they have more intelligence about our country than us.
Kidega. This is what I'm saying. I am saying, apart from cases where, for example, our police has come to give us fake reports, etc., I think that the UK systems, you may not agree with the UK and the US, but anyone who has an ounce of research knows that their systems are much more sophisticated than our systems. And that's an issue of capacity. It doesn't matter whether I like them or not.
True, but Lawel, to advance the argument that the US system has capacity to stretch globally and still be effective vis-a-vis us who are based here in a small, geographical location, that we cannot be more effective within this small jurisdiction vis-a-vis the USA that is stretching globally. I mean,
I think,
no matter,
I think the point I'm making, I think
and,
you're taking...
and that is why, if you may recall, that the colonial era collapsed because UK was overly stretched, right? Like they were trying to be here, and that overstretched them, right? Because it's impossible to have effective governance if you're trying to be everywhere.
The reason why apartheid failed was because the stretch was that there was a lot of pressure.
Kidega, let's put this.
And the point I'm making really is that for the US to take particular steps, it is based on real information. I think for me, that's the point. I don't want to say who has more capacity. People will research and know which entity has more capacity. The point I'm making here is that before they sanction someone, they have information to work with.
Let's break it down to a layman out there. Who perhaps didn't understand all these, complicated things. That what we know is that our government in Uganda has a DSO in every village in this country. I don't know the capacity of the USA intelligence in terms of their deepest reach in this country's, geographical area. But what we know is that the NRM government has individuals at every village in this country. Okay, so how do you convince a Ugandan out there that the USA government has more intelligence than our own government here?
I think the point I was saying...
I think
that's besides the point. But the point I was making
is that the point is you're overly undermining the sovereignty and the capacity. Yes, we agree that we are not the same, all right?
Yeah.
I agree on that, but I mean, to continuously bastardize and make us look like you guys, you're weak and that's all you'll ever be, is unfair to the aspirations of Africans.
I think he soon get
this is why I'm being misunderstood. That point of capacity, I would still stand by it, but for me that's not the most point I'm talking about. Is that we have seen cases here when the police spokesperson comes and says things that really do not make logical sense, or sometimes that are even retracted. Or we've seen government, even legislation from parliament that is not well informed by research. We've had such cases. My argument was to say that before the US or the UK takes such drastic steps, the system is designed in such a way that they work with information. They do their part to find out that information.
My point is that the USA and the UK are not beacons of democracy, beacons of, whatever it is. We have just seen how Trump is being persecuted in the USA.
Yes,
so don't if you overly glorify them, I think that's where I am.
Let me give you this
agreeing
example.
With you. Yeah, because Trump
let me just give you this example.
Found guilty of 34 charges.
I want him to give me an answer for this.
Yes.
One of the people who are being sanctioned is General Lawel.
Yes.
On the basis of Kasese massacre.
Yes.
But let me just give you a small count on that issue. Before whatever happened in Kasese happened, the king of Wenzururu wanted to succeed from Uganda and declared it themselves as a state.
Secede.
They went ahead to recruit and train. They call themselves Kwiriza Mutima. They're so patriotic Wenzururus. And they started going against government, using all the local weapons and even bring in ammunitions. The team that was protecting the king, gave information to government. Who are you, PDF? What is happening here is not good. These people are in advanced stages, thinking that because their tourism capacity is funding this government, they are able to deal with their issues if they stay alone. When the government went ahead to negotiate, generals and very senior government officials were meant to kneel down. Not only kneeling down, they removed ammunition from them, they stripped them down and humiliated them. They went ahead to massacre 30 officers of government before government retaliated at a vast level. After that,
massacred 30
UPDF and police officers, they were killed in Kasese.
It's not true.
It is on record, and the list is there.
You mean a police post, but let's proceed.
Okay? After all that, the government went ahead to say, please, we can negotiate this. Stop there. The king was not listening. They refused totally. the government said we can now take over, and because it is constitutional that protecting the territory integrity of a country is their major role, and they realized that they were threatened, their territory is threatened. After that, when the king was brought into courts, the negotiations went ahead by religious leaders and all other people, goodwill people, until the government pulled it down and the thing ended. Today, one of the leaders in negotiations on behalf of government is sanctioned by the same people. That he went ahead and killed innocent people, massacred them. So the question is, should government of Uganda interest itself in protecting its territories or bend it down to the so-called human rights against the protection of its territories? That's why I say that they don't mean well to us, the so-called beacons of human rights and the rule of law. They don't mean well. I'm giving that as an example, and to all the people who can have conscience.
But also,
they
I
can
think
see
that example also fits into the argument that Lawel was trying to make. No, in fact, it defeats Lawel's argument.
Which is?
Because if you're saying that the role that General Elwelo played, as you've told us,
yes,
is not the information that the West is telling us.
Yes.
The West is
Which
saying that
information is
General Elwelo oversaw the massacre. He,
of innocent.
in fact, commanded.
That
And yet, if Lawel's information is anything to go by, Nimrod, if what he's telling us is anything to go by, then Elwelu's role was negotiation and trying to create a truce.
And he was
trying
still
to negotiate and say, guys,
Can I provide clarity on that?
So maybe
and backed by the
you can see
constitution.
that after all, the information that the USA government has is not accurate.
Can I
So
provide,
I wonder
can I
if
provide
the
clarity on
intelligence
that?
as a
Can I provide
relevant-
clarity? And I think that you guys, you lack some. Let me ask you. Let me give you an example. So the MPs of Kasese and the rest petitioned the government of Uganda to the ICC, right?
Yes.
Second, there was a lot of coverage even before the attack happened. You honestly think that the US or whoever it is does not have information of what happened? I think they do.
The question is which
The real
information
contest
do they
really,
have? That's
the real
the most
I don't think that Nimrod
Which
you can have.
information?
But anyway, that's not a discussion. But maybe when you take power, and like Museveni took power in 1986, and you sit in that seat, you'll get to see the reality of where power lies in the geopolitics. That's not a discussion for today. But I think the sanctioning of Elwelo is not that the government of Uganda can't protect its boundaries, right? And that government was not supposed to attack. The discussions I have seen really was on how do you engage. Because there are rules of engagement, right? Even when you're justified in attacking a country, how do you engage as an army which is armed, right? The contest I've seen, for me, my contest really is not on your facts. Some of what you're saying is true, that there were indeed negotiations going on and that the Omusinga refused to back down, right? The question, however, is if you're a government which has this army and you have a section of people within a palace, how do you engage these people? I think the contest really was on killing women and the other people indiscriminately the way they did it, right? As an army person, is there a thought of how do you engage people who want to secede? Maybe, but I think there is a valid discussion on both sides on how do you engage a populace. And if you're getting it.
How do you engage with someone who has killed you? How do you?
That's
No.
up to you.
If
I
someone
think
is
it has
armed with
to
a
do-
machete and a spear and has killed 1, 2, 3 to 30, how do you engage with that person? Has that result? Is so
declared
determined that he can do anything to stop you. How do you, and you also
Kidega.
very well you know that
declared war.
they have declared war on you. So how do you engage that?
Kidega, let me say this. The issue of Kasese, personally, I find it serious.
It is a
I-
serious
Yes,
I do not want to firmly start to engage on the facts of the case. But I think for me, what I know the debate is on to how was government supposed to engage. I don't know if you're getting it. Because I look at the picture.
How would you have advised government to engage in that kind of situation?
I think reasonably, in a way that does not seem to suggest that the government doesn't care about its people. Because to some extent it amounted to indiscriminate indiscriminate killing. And he's telling you these are guys who had spears and all that. I think that government had capacity to combat or deal with people who are in that palace. But that's for the military trained individuals to engage. I don't have that insight, that training. I won't claim to say this is how they should have engaged. But I think there's a valid debate.
So those who have the insight, who have the training, engage the way they did.
Yes, and those.
So if you're saying
and
that,
the US,
if you're saying that,
yes.
you don't have the insight to engage, then how would you come on then to
yes, and this is what I'm saying.
Those who have the insight,
exactly, and this is what I'm saying. I am saying also the US, working with the information it has, it deemed it unacceptable, and that such conduct can be sanctioned. I don't know if you're getting it. And I'm saying that it is not unreasonable for the US, with the information they have, to take those steps.
Okay. You see, Lawel, my point of departure with you is that you're overly glorifying and you're making the USA look like they're some sort of angels, right?
I didn't say.
I don't know if you've braced yourself with the US in Afghanistan, the US in Libya. I don't know. Like you see, because you know, I don't even think the US has
the moral authority
exactly to come here and lecture us about how we should have dealt with that particular situation. I agree that maybe the government used some excess force. That one I agree with you. But the issues of intra-conflict within the country can and should be addressed by institutions within the country. The USA, the actions of violence that have meted across the globe, in Afghanistan, in Libya, you know, they don't have the moral authority to come here and lecture us about, you know, how we should treat our own. I agree that those actions were excessive and they are very, very regrettable. They never should have happened. But you know,
what about accountability?
The US cannot be the one to.
What about accountability at Parliament?
Sorry?
Let's talk about accountability.
No, that is also an internal issue.
And it's regrettable.
Yes, it is.
I think,
but also it is an internal issue.
Kidega. I think the only point here we departed was on what you perceived as overestimating the capacity of the US intelligence and their machinery. That's where we disagreed. I haven't at any point justified the interest of the West. And like I said, you don't have to agree with the US to recognize their capacity. I don't know if you're getting it.
Yes.
Exactly. Let me conclude this way. That the reason why you have a section of people, I don't want to say majority, but many people who are calling out for accountability, celebrating the sanctions, is a recognition that they have failed internally to find mechanisms of how to hold those who continuously subjugate them, steal from them, continuously go scot-free, and they think that if anyone else is going to act on it, well and good.
Yeah,
they're happy with it.
I think on that point, Lawel, we are due for Nimrod, we are due for a short commercial break. But I think just to conclude with this point is that our systems actually need to be checked, because if you look at Parliament, you look at the judiciary, there are actual gaps that have to be filled. But I'll begin with you from after the short commercial break. To the viewers, just stay tuned in and see you shortly after.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. We shall just continue from where we stopped. Nimrod.
Yes.
Yeah. You heard what Lawel just said, and maybe you could speak to the aspect of our internal systems.
Yes.
Do you acknowledge that in terms of accountability, in terms of enforcement of human rights, that internally we have created a gap and therefore inevitably invited other international players into our affairs, because we have either by design or by negligence just failed to build institutions that have capacity, and that is why we find people interfering with our business.
Thank you. And just like in other states in the world, there is no state that you can cite for me in this world that you say all its institutions and its systems are perfect, including the so-called beacons of justice and human rights. We all know what's happening in their states that we see, but we don't interfere. We see, we either maybe talk about it or we don't go and act in those states. Coming back to your question, Uganda is a process that we're still growing. There are times when Bugisu sub-region had one magistrate. Today, every district has a magistrate to court. Okay? You have seen that this government has continuously, every single financial year, increased budgets for the justice system in the country. Increased the human resource for the justice system in this country. So, the justice system is growing and it gets better and better and better, and it will continue to do that. I agree that there are some instances where you think they could have acted better and they have not acted better. That's my opinion. And until you listen from them on why things are like that, you cannot go ahead to condemn them. For you to say that the Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament is corrupt, the question is, which law has she violated? Why don't you go to court?
Anti-Corruption Act.
If there is a law, why is it that the so-called activists of fighting for vulnerable and human rights and defending the country, why not taking her to court? That you diverted these resources, it was against this constitution, you did this and that. They all stop at exposing. Why? Because my knowledge on justice is that it works with evidence for you to prove someone guilty. What I expected, for example, from the UK system was for them to sit and wait until the Ugandan court of law concludes these cases and say, now we are done with them. Either these people are guilty or not guilty. Then they use that as a basis that, okay, now that the Ugandan government is done, meaning they have reached at its epi, we can now go ahead and say, you did this and that, and because of this and that, we are sanctioning you.
You see, the difficulty with your approach is that the likes of Lawel will say that justice delayed is justice denied, all right? Already our systems have evidently proven that for a case to get prosecuted to its logical conclusion, it can take I don't know how long.
Yeah,
but you see, there are victims of this misconduct
as I said,
who
from
need
the
justice and need the
from
justice
the beginning,
now.
That
so if your systems have proven that, man, for us here, we try cases in 10 years, so are the victims of this corruption going to wait for you for 10 years?
That's why I'm saying that what's right to be done by the people who are celebrating here was to push government that faster this process, make it easier for us, push these things much faster. If you're exonerating so and so, on which basis? This could be the demands, even by the superpowers. They could be demanding answers from this government.
A speedy trial.
A speedy trial, advocating for that. That let the trial move very fast. Why exonerating so and so from this case? Was it because she was not in the boardroom that decisions were made? Was it because she was not contacted directly that this is happening? So that if they advocate for that and it's not done, then they can go ahead to sanction. But here, you're it's like telling a baby, a toddler, to start running a relay. because you want things to move in your opinion. There's a processes. Let's respect the internal processes. If they fail,
Even if they are...
yes,
they are
no, I
slow
agree they
and-
should
and
not
that-
be slow. They may be slow for a reason. Have we heard from them? Why the courts keep saying, we are getting ready, maybe we need to collect much evidence. Because people can still appeal against their judgment if it's not concrete. So they don't want to leave room maybe for that. I'm thinking.
Lawel,
So,
the internal capacity of these
so
institutions.
as I conclude on that, I agree that this government should continuously build capacity to deal with internal issues and prove to the world, beyond Ugandans, that our capacity is there to deal with our issues. The delays in these prosecutions and the dealing with corrupt officials, it has cost us to this point. I agree that government, without fear or favor, must deal with the corrupt people because it is affecting everyone in this country, including the vulnerable, but most importantly, it's undermining the mass movement of NRA that we are now dealing with corrupt officials. So I think it is important that the government pulls up its stockings when it comes to dealing with this corrupt hardly, not taking long, hardly, and they prove to the world that we can manage our issues. But building capacity, it is even US is still building its capacity. We can always continuously build our capacity. There's so many cases.
Fair enough. Lawel, if you hear Nimrod argues progressive realization that, you know, we are still a low-developed country and we are bound to realize some of these issues progressively. You know, our institutions will grow with time. That capacity will not fall from heaven. So, do you think that these sanctions could have deprived us of the opportunity to actually explore our internal remedies? Because, like we all know, this case is still before the courts of law. It hasn't been tried before the highest appellant court. So, is there an aspect of you know, the internal system being not given a chance?
If Nimrod and the other young NRM people want to betray their conscience, it is entirely up to them. So we have people like Olivia Lutaya who have spent 3 years in prison, while the local court say they are still looking for evidence to prosecute or persecute them. These are people who have been behind bars for so long without any evidence. We have people like Chibalama who have taken 4 years without even being aligned in court for the last 2 years. These are people whom government has not found conclusive evidence to prosecute them, but they can't find justice. On this other side, we have people who have continuously embezzled funds, who award themselves money. We have people who have admitted to diverting resources that were supposed to go to a vulnerable, poor region. Some are even pictured to have put them on their private properties. Some are saying they have returned them. There is at least tangible enough evidence to have these people before bars. These people are not yet before bars, right? So even if I do not like my neighbor, but my husband is constantly beating me up, the day my neighbor will come to save me that day, I'm going to be happy because I have always wanted capacity to resist the beatings from my husband and relief which I will never get. So for those of us who are happy about the US sanctions, it's not that we love the neighbor or that we don't love our family. We are saying that the person, the father, who has the responsibility to protect every citizen in this country, has constantly treated us as if we are not deserving of the father's love. The young people who question him are constantly arrested. Some have been tortured. Nothing happens. There are people under his party who are constantly embezzling, and people here are telling us to wait for 2 years, for a year, for prosecution to happen. The IGG, who is supposed to prosecute or persecute, the FIA, which is the Financial Intelligence Authority, which is supposed to act, all these have resources. They have not done their part. private prosecution has been made to fail because every time someone like Muhwezi takes government to court, the DPP's office takes over the case, which means private individuals, their agency can't go through because they can't hold these people to account. The truth is, there is politics at play. People with a lot of political power by virtue of office or the regions where they come from, depending on how they're important to the person of the president, cannot face the law just like any other citizen. If any person, any neighbor decides that these people should not have the luxury of going to his country to continue to benefit from an unfair advantage from plundering from the vulnerable poor, if that happens, we are going to celebrate, even if it is at the risk of being called less patriotic or not loving our country. We are saying, if this father of our family decides that he indeed wants to take care of his family, to fulfill the mandate as to why he was voted, to fulfill the 10-point program as is talked about in Chankwanzi, people are not going to be happy with foreign intervention. All of us understand that this is our country, that we deserve sovereignty. But the people supposed to protect this sovereignty are using the tools of government to oppress those that oppose them, to advantage those that support them. That's all I can say from my side as a conclusion on the issue of sanctions.
Okay, quite interesting. I think we need to move on to the issue of religious tourism. Nimrod, unless you have a final comment as well.
Yes.
On the issue of sanctions, I'll give that time. Because to me, if you look at people who presided over the plunder of a poor continent, they sat somewhere in Berlin and say, now let's go and plunder this continent. They came here, took from the poor. Now they are saying that don't take from the poor.
We are protecting.
If we protect the poor, yet they came here and for so many years took away from us.
I think
the poor Africans. Now that's
what we are, but you see.
Okay, I know two wrongs don't make a right.
It's called whataboutism. When this guy says that there's no other country which doesn't have these inefficiencies.
I know two wrongs don't make a right. I agree with you. My point is that before you pick the stick in my eye, first pull out the log in your own.
But do you feel that the concerns of the Ugandans, those that are celebrating, are justified?
They are justified. Okay. My issue is on the intervention of the USA and the UK. It is not justified at all. Yes, your final words.
It is interesting to listen to my comrade here from Tuzungumuzo saying that we are betraying our consciousness. I would not agree that I am betraying my consciousness if I'm sticking to the fact that Africa, Uganda, deserves Ugandan and African answers to our challenges. We don't deserve American answers and European answers to our challenges. Why am I saying that? The history has it clear that there is no way those people will wish us better than ourselves. That they love us so much than we love ourselves. That they wish us so good that they protect us, these poor people so much than we protect them. That they want Karamojong so much than this government wishes them well. I don't think it's there.
Mind you, when they were presiding over Uganda in the colonial era, the same British used to deport people who used to disagree with the colonial rule to Karamoja.
No, you see.
They are the people who orchestrated the economic situation in Karamoja that we see today.
Kidega.
They looked at Karamoja as like a place where they would deport criminals.
Yes, and
so now
that's why they put down the flights.
Let me ask him. A small question as you conclude.
Them coming now to appear to protect them is really.
Let me ask him. Because what I want to understand is that the sanctions
really
are not
hypocritical.
The sanctions are not in any way stopping us from doing what we want. What they are saying is the Speaker of Parliament and his family and the patriotic other NRM individuals should not go to their country. You who is very patriotic, what do you want with them? I thought that the most African thing to do, now that you're posturing, is to let them have their country. You don't have any business there. The reason you're angry is because you realize that we are so intertwined. And we're intertwined that we need to go there because they have what we want, right? So this whole thing of, oh, they are this bad, oh, they are this evil, when what is angering you is that you can't go to them. You can't have their visa.
Okay.
I mean, that's double standard.
Thank you. You see, Lawel here, I don't know if he's speaking because he wants a visa or something, but
Okay.
to be honest,
Lawel wants to go to White House.
I don't see, I don't know, I'm just
With reporters.
because
I
you
mean,
see,
what-
the reason why we're speaking
It's
this
hypocritical.
is not because we think it is not important to go to US or because we are anything you are trying to bring out. The point we are sticking to this is that the so-called Americans, they always have their slogan of America first. I'm not here to defend either Right Honorable Speaker or anyone sanctioned. I'm speaking just as another nationalist. That when you want to, because you see this issue today is about Speaker, tomorrow it will be about someone else.
Sure.
Tomorrow it will be about someone else. At the end of the day, we are welcoming them to continuously interfere with us. And it will be progressive.
That is-
That's why we are saying,
That is the
stop
point
there.
that Lawel is not seeing. Lawel
Yes.
is seeing it as, oh, you
It's
know what?
it's about the
what,
speaker.
What you want to go and do in the USA,
No.
it's about setting a trend and opening
and they're
floodgates
going to use it.
for continuously now
interfere.
undermining and
And
interfering.
tomorrow-
It's a floodgate.
Tomorrow,
It's a floodgate.
let me conclude.
It is
tomorrow,
not about whether these guys want to go to the...
they don't need.
When you see it like that, then you simplify the issue.
Kidega, I
You
agree
see,
with you. to
It's
that
tomorrow-
about creating a precedent that
The
you
point
know what,
that I'm
guys,
making is-
we can come after you and you'll do nothing about it.
Tomorrow they will start
today
interfering
if you keep-
with issues beyond what we are
Yes.
talking about.
Kidega,
And we shall say,
Yes.
after all, we
Today
cannot
it is
deal with them.
sanctions.
Tomorrow they will undermine our security.
Yes.
Kidega,
And we shall
Kidega,
keep
I
quiet.
Before
agree
you know
with
it,
you.
you...
Kidega, I agree with you because
You
you started
are
from the
cool.
point of realizing that they don't carry their interest for your sake.
Yes.
I agree with you. But the problem is that you don't help the situation
Yes, by
when
by
you
doing-
don't do your part
Yes.
of developing your own country, but also catering for your citizens. I can tell you for sure, even after the anti-homosexuality bill, when President Museveni was saying, let's tighten our belts, let's be frugal, there are people who are willing. Because there are many Ugandans who would agree with that legislation. It's a popular legislation, right? But the problem is to say, let's tighten our belt.
Then
and
do
then
the
you see
contrary.
the figures at Parliament. And it doesn't help the situation. And I am saying, look, it is not true that most Ugandans, okay, there are some opposition figures who may be sellouts to the West, but it's not true that people don't love this country. Or that they don't also have ancestors who are slaves, who are plundered and all those things. It's just that this government is not helping the situation. If you prosecuted Anita among all the other people, we would have an issue of saying, why are they interfering? But when you ask that question, when you have not done your part this side, it doesn't look like interfering. It looks like help. Even if it's not help in real terms, but that's how it looks.
So, as I conclude,
Fair enough.
when we let them continuously undermine our sovereignty, it's not about the individuals, it's about the image of our country on the international level. It's about the status of Uganda outside there. Because whatever they're trying to do is to undermine that, look, the whole world, it's Uganda you see here, it cannot manage its affairs. That's the whole message they are sending. They are saying, look, it's not about what their system is doing for us to have more intelligence
haven't we failed
and
in
more we are
accountability?
prepared to deal with them more than they can deal with their issues.
Wouldn't you say
So-
we are failed on accountability, at least?
I don't think it is entirely true that we have failed on accountability. I don't think it's entirely true.
Okay.
I have so many examples that these people were arrested, even remanded, until they asked for bail, which is constitutional
Failing
right.
doesn't mean you're not trying.
Yes. Then they said, can we have the trial outside the prison? It's their constitutional right
But
to be
also
given bail.
you-
They were arrested
you know-
by the same state.
Lawel,
Okay.
you know that
So-
under whatever international law is that if a state does not invite you to its rescue, you're not duty bound to offer your help to them. So if we have failed as a country, first of all, we must confess that we have failed, then invite you to come and help us. You can't assume that, oh, now they've failed, let us now go and intervene. No.
So,
That is not
so
how the
what I'm
international system
saying,
works.
you see, when a
we must
thief,
invite you.
when a thief comes through the window, oftenly to steal, uses the what? The back window. and you don't react, the following day he'll use a front window, knowing that the gold is there. If you don't react, the other day will come with the door, open the door, and takes everything. So, me, in my opinion, these are people who are now using the back window. Tomorrow they'll use the front window, and the time we wake up, they'll be using the door to take over. So I think as Ugandans and Africans who care about ourselves and our territorial capacity and our sovereignty, it is important that we don't allow this window to continue. Me, it's not about those individuals, it's about the state and its institutions.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Let's move now to the other topic and just use the next 15 minutes for it. And Lawel, since you, okay, yes, I'll begin with you. Is that the issue of religious tourism, you know, and how best Uganda can prepare itself and, you know, project itself to the globe as a potential destination for, you know, all these religious tourists. But also, I think the first point is, do we have those sites, you know, besides Namugongo, you know?
I think what's not in dispute is that Uganda has a lot of potential, especially in as far as tourism is concerned. So religious tourism is a big area, right? Countries like Saudi Arabia are really reaping so much from religious tourism. And I think like the story of the Uganda Martyrs is one that has potential. It may not be as huge. We don't know how big it can be. The point I'm willing to make is that it has a lot of huge potential and that we can maximize that to earn the dollar, right? But the problem is that religious tourism, just like the other areas where we have a lot of potential, are not exploited and maximized. And that's why I think we've had discussions on the budget on what the investment priorities of government are. You look at the story of the is it mountain gorillas or chimpanzees in southwest, where majority of them are in Uganda, but Rwanda, because of its marketing and all that, yields much more from that sector than we do. It is to point the fact that whether it is national parks, whether it is the terrain, whether it's the climate, whether it is religious tourism, whether it is cultural tourism, we really have a lot of potential. We just are not doing what we ought to do. Yeah.
Yes, Nimrod, your opening remarks with regards to, you know, this whole tourism sector, but precisely the, you know, religious aspect of it.
Thank you. First of all, I congratulate the government and the people of Uganda and people all over the world for celebrating Ugandan Martyrs that ended, I think, 2 days ago. One, I congratulate the government that the security, I have not had any major incidents. This shows the capacity that this government over time has built that can protect. According to the figures I had, about 1 million people, pilgrims were there, and were all protected, and most of them have gone back safely. But also, they walked safely. That's something we should never underestimate. That they walked from Ruahaha to Namugongo, from Mugulu, from Nebi, from Masaka, everywhere. Good roads to Namugongo. But most important, secure. That no one was attacked in their journey to Namugongo. That's something I highly congratulate the government on that, on the security, and also keeping the area safe. I come from I stayed those ends, and there's no my major incidents. Back to the issue of religious tourism. The Ugandan tourism alone is giving this country around $1.4 billion a year, earning this country that money. When we zero down to religious tourism, the Ugandan story of Uganda Martyrs, since we're talking about that, because Uganda Martyrs, the Catholic, the Anglican, and even the Muslims that were killed because of their faith. It's not a Ugandan story. It's not an African story. It's a world story. Why? There are so many Kizitos in Nigeria than in Uganda. Actually, there are so many Kizitos in Brazil than in Uganda. Because of that story.
Sure.
Yes, you can research about it. People who are called Kizito in Brazil have more than those of us in Uganda. Even Nigeria. That's why we have so many people coming from Nigeria to Namugongo and South Africa. Because of the story of Uganda martyrs dying for the faith they had. If we position the religious tourism very well in this country, we can earn a fortune. A fortune. Let me tell you why. We all know Taj Mahal is a religious site in India. And its story is this place is earning India annually $4 billion annually. You can put Ugandan currency, you know how much I'm talking about. $4 billion annually. It gets 2 million visitors annually visiting that site. One building like this. And you know the story behind it? A king built it for his third wife, and that third wife, called Mahal, died along the way they were going to fight. And it was kept with art pieces about that woman, and because it's just a love story. The whole thing is about a love story, preserved but well marketed. They have marketed it that people go there to benchmark, to think, to enjoy, and it brings around 6 trillion shillings in Ugandan currency annually to the Indians. There is no story on the African continent that's bigger than our Ugandan Martyr story. It's not there. It's not there. The only challenge we are having now is positioning Namugongo.
It is a serious patriot.
You know,
How he conveniently thinks.
you know, this is the only area I think with Lawel we are going to think together. I just hope, because these are facts that everyone can see them. This is what I think. If we could just position Namugongo area that in a year can attract 2 million religious believers to come and see what happened and read about the story and touch and feel. If those tourists are just spending around maybe $2,000 only in this country, you know how much that will be? You can do the mathematics. Yeah, that will be over $2 million a year. Meaning that if we have more visitors in Nigeria and Brazil, that this is not a Ugandan story, it's a world story that can attract the whole world. This whole world has 2 billion Christians. These Christians, all of them can be sold that there is a place in Uganda that you should visit and learn about. It's all about positioning.
So how can we position ourselves?
This is how you can make that.
If our national budget does not allocate enough money towards the tourism sector?
Wow, thank you. Yes, the research done by World Bank, I think 5 years ago, indicated that Uganda, if it just spent $30 million annually to tell the Ugandan story out there, in then 6 years of spending that money, it will earn $60 billion. I'm giving you, I'll come there. And by the way, this is I'm speaking not because, and this is on government, I don't have so many things here, but let me give you what I'm saying. That if Uganda, this is done by World Bank, that if Uganda starts to spend $30 million on positioning Uganda outside there, in its 6th year, it will be earning close to 52 trillion shillings Ugandan currency. Meaning that beyond half of our budget as a country will be catering tourism. South Africa alone spends $10 million on telling South Africa about Africa. We know that South Africa is more popular than Africa, but it spends $10 million a year to tell Africans about South Africa. That's why Johannesburg, annually, its airport receives 22 million tourists, or arrivals, and Uganda receives 2 million arrivals annually.
Tourists.
Not tourists, I'm saying arrivals.
Okay.
Why am I saying this? It's about positioning and marketing the country, Uganda, and marketing Namugongo. I think the Uganda Tourism Board and the Ministry of Wildlife and whatever, they have not done justice to this place called Namugongo Matters. It has a lot of capacity, it has a lot of history that they only need the researchers, who can sit and have a strategic plan on how that place can be turned into the most favorite tourism site in the world. Look at this accommodation. When you reach there, there's a problem that the restaurants, the accommodation, the whole area is not organized. They need to organize it first and position it. When they position it, the people who organize these days, they are not going to ask for any contribution again from government to organize these days. 2, why do we have to have once a year to celebrate it? If a year alone is having
I think
1 million
I
domestic.
think,
don't interject.
Honestly,
I'm
are we not in the manifesto?
No, please. No, please interject. No, please interject.
Let me finish and interject when he has his full
This
information.
is the problem I have.
No,
because
when he has the full
Allow you.
information. No,
Allow you,
let
just let
me
me
finish my point.
Okay.
My last point is that
No, so then my first.
we don't need to celebrate. I was giving you an example. That Taj Mahal is not visited once a year. We don't need to have Namgongo matters celebrated once a year. If annually we are saying it has attracted 1 million domestic tourists, because a tourist is as simple as a person who moves from one place to another without permanent residence and spends money. If someone's moving from Bali to Namgongo, along the road is spending money, buying soap, buying food, money is being to exchange. Meaning that if annually we have these days more than once, let me give you an example, last one. There's a gentleman in Namgongo. His work annually, do you know what he does? Right now, he just buys pigs. And he takes care of them. He only sells them in 5 days a year. From 28th May to 4th June. That's his business. But he starts taking care of them immediately after matters, buys the small ones, and he he tells us a year he can make over 50 million shillings in just those 4 days. Because he positions himself that as soon as people start arriving, this whole street is mine and I'll be selling pork.
Yeah.
And he positions. So we can imagine we're having such events more than once a year.
Yeah.
And positioning Namgongo matters as a center of the most richest history of faith.
Interesting.
That everyone can tap in. Thank you.
Yes.
I just wanted to. I think that what he's saying really, we understand the potential. I think where you sit, I think close to people who are in charge of this government, please tell them to be serious about realizing this potential. I don't know if you heard about the Rwenzori Marathon, which is really supposed to be a big deal. About the Kilimanjaro Marathon. A lot of money comes in. Yeah. Some, I think 2-3, some few videos are released of recent to kickstart that project. I can tell you that up to now, they haven't got a headline sponsor because there are still quarrels over who should control the budget for the Rwenzori Marathon. You need to look it up. It's being led by, I think, Amos Wekesa.
Yeah.
You saw the debate in Parliament over Nyege Nyege. I don't know, the potential is there, but I think the willingness to explore it, to realize our potential. If I talked about how I think President Kagame is doing better in terms of marketing, you perhaps will say, I am glorifying a foreigner. No. But what I'm saying is that there are countries which do not have as much of what we have here that are trying to maximize it. You get? And I think that Uganda is not. And also the other thing, and this, going to the discussion we had earlier, the thing with sanctions, right, is that they don't just restrict the Speaker of Parliament from going out. It sends signals to investors, to tourists, to individuals because we don't look, other countries don't look at the Speaker as just an errand girl of the president. They look at her as the head of an arm of government. When they start to see sanctions on the person, ministers, on the head of parliament, they start to pick signals. They are unwilling to invest in such a country. They are unwilling to visit those countries. They don't know about this. The certainty is not guaranteed that they can have long-term investment, even if it's in the tourism sector. And so I think that we really need to build this country better, right? And those of us that constantly seem to be whining or complaining, it's not that we don't love this country. It's just that things are going wrong or we can do better and it's not being done. And my hope, honestly, is that even if I don't join government, become in charge of government, that when Kidega, who has chosen to be in NRM, takes power, they can see things for what they are and rectify them, as opposed to using time to come to here and defend the indefensible that every citizen can see, right? So I am willing for Nimrod, for example, to support the NRM, but while recognizing my misery. I don't know if you're getting it, because you have no business, for example, defending Among when honestly, you know that this country has a problem with finances, that the medical interns took almost 6 months without funding to go to the areas of placement, and there is a lady who has a budget of over 200 million for dressing up. I don't know if you're getting it. We are not that country that can't use those resources to perhaps renovate or put infrastructure at Namugongo shrines, right? Then the other thing I want to talk about is how do we start to look at our African stories, right? Because we have stories of Kabarega's resistance in Bunyoro, and I think he escaped to northern Uganda, right? We have stories that are local to us. We have in Ankole, we have some guy who killed the white man who was in charge of administering that place. The areas are still there. It's in Uganda with has stone piled there. There are stories, that African stories, which we also need to start to leverage on, because the story of India is Indian. It's to them, right? So it's not me saying that we shouldn't leverage on the Namugongo. I think that we can expand in the faith of patriotism and Pan-Africanism, tell our African story, and have people come.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying.
In your last words, in a minute. Time is fast spent. Okay, a minute and a half, so you can make that point, but also give us your parting shots.
Yes, okay. One, I appeal to government, my government that I love so much, that the potential this country has when it comes to tourism and also religious tourism is extremely huge, and we need to tap into. What I think is we have very brilliant Ugandans. I don't think there's a shortage of strategic people. We just need to use them correctly. I think the government and our parliament should appropriate more resources to marketing this country, to the tourism boards, to make sure that they position Uganda and religious tourism as a destination for everyone. For example, we have Catholics in Italy, we have Catholics in Germany, we have Anglicans in Britain. All these places who can come and enjoy the story, enjoy our food, enjoy our weather, enjoy our people. Uganda, God has gifted us with all these things. We only need to push and position this country and market it like the other countries, Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda. But lastly, I think that as Ugandans, there is no one or nothing should distract us from defending our state, defending our sovereignty. That whoever wishes us better should come and negotiate and listen to us. They should not think from their boardroom and decide on how things should be done here. I stand by that, and I think end of the day, when you don't open the back window, you'll never access the front door.
Interesting. Lawel, your parting shots.
Yes. Conclusively, I want to speak to Ugandans that the anti-Western and Pan-African narrative is not enough on its own if the people that are preaching it don't act on it. The ANC, which is the true embodiment of the African fight for colonialism and Pan-Africanism, which has for so long enjoyed that, has stopped, or is seemingly has stopped to represent those views and is not working for the people. And I think that you can see the election results. And I think that should send a message to even the NRM and other entities which continuously are milking the idea of Pan-Africanism to constantly gather support and shut down those who ask them, to know that it is no longer sustainable, that whoever is in power should be able to meaningfully debunk the Western narrative or their subjugation, but should also work for the people, that the people are willing to move with whoever is working for them. I encourage all young people across board to know that we still have time on our side, that we still have our conscience, and that we can change the fate of this country only if we stick true to our conscience, stick true to what works for our brothers and sisters, and that we don't have to continuously submit to those who have power. We can always take that power from them and use it to do what is right. I beg to stop here.
I hope that also applies to not submitting to the powers.
I don't submit. Yes, I submit to the power of Uganda.
Well, that is just it. Thank you very much, Nimrod, for your time. Thank you, Comrade Lawel and Comrade Nimrod, for your time. And of course, to the viewers, it's a pleasure having you every single Wednesday afternoon. To the producers, thank you for ensuring that this show airs right on time at 2 p.m. And until next week, same time, same place, bye-bye.